Thanks, Peter. Thanks, RIU. I think Elixir maybe started in Texas and then the North Sea, then France, then Colorado, then Mongolia, and now Queensland. It's good to be back. And I wasn't there for all of those. Okay, so firstly, the macro context. We're a natural gas company, methane, and we think that it is a great environment to be looking at a methane-based investment just now for a number of reasons. Firstly, the energy transition is very hard, and that's being kind. The governments now recognise that, and the demand for gas is expected to grow rather than diminish in the decades to come. LNG is relevant for our assets in Queensland. That's an LNG exporting province with growing and spare capacity in the liquefaction plants, and observers expect LNG markets to grow, particularly in Asia. And Australia's role in this ever tougher world is that gas from us is valued by our allies in the likes of Japan and South Korea for its security as well as its price. Now, our assets located on the East Coast, and even here in Perth, I'm sure you've heard that the gas supply crunch there is now upon us. Government intervention has actually put a floor on gas prices of about $12. LNG imports are inevitable, and governments will need to provide more support to avoid the political consequences of cold showers and power outages. So just a few more points on the East Coast crisis. This winter we were really close to gas running out in Victoria. Somewhat milder weather intervened in the middle of winter and put that off. But in the meantime, depletion goes on. Bass Strait is diminishing. It's not got many years to go, and it's in rapid and irreversible decline. So more gas is needed. LNG imports will introduce a new pricing signal of about $20 a gigajoule coming in. That will be a marginal price setter. Our assets in the Taroom Trough, which I'll show you shortly, it's very well located to supply East Coast as well as international markets. I won't spend too long on this. The Elixir team is being stable and well known to you. There's an interesting anecdote about our chairman, Richard Coddy. QGC, which he successfully led about 15 years ago, took over a company called Sunshine Gas in about 2007. It owned acreage in the Taroom Trough. QGC was itself bought by British Gas. They spent $300 million in the Taroom Trough. They were then bought by Shell, and Shell are now working on that asset which Sunshine Gas had all those years ago. One of my colleagues, Stephen Kellerman, was the head of Coal Seam Gas in Santos, and we did a lot of work together. The Taroom Trough was well known about 20 years ago as hosting a lot of gas, but also known to be pretty difficult and expensive to take it out. That was in a $3 gas price environment. Now we're in a $12 to $20 gas price environment, and technology on extracting gas has vastly improved. Corporate structure, I won't dwell on. We've just got a bit more than 1 billion shares on issue. Our cash position is assisted by R&D credits from the government with respect to our Daydream 2 program. We're a pretty liquid company. When news flow is hot, we can trade at $1 million a day. So the Taroom Trough, this is a deep part of the Permian era Bowen Basin, which has delivered tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars of value to Australia in multiple ways. In the north, it hosts the premier coke and coal assets in Australia and some of the best in the world. In effect, in the middle, it hosts some of the best coal seam gas fields in the world. We're a bit further south. It deepens as it goes south. We're 3,000, 4,000 metres in depth. There's an enormous amount of gas in place here, been known around for a long time, and now we and our neighbours are starting to take it to the surface, hopefully in an economic fashion. This location is advantaged by its proximity to infrastructure, pipelines that take gas from Queensland to the southern states, to the LNG plants in Gladstone that I mentioned have growing ullage. There's also a lot of local gas usage for a number of power stations in the region. There's gas storage in the region, which is expected to grow. There are new gas-fired power projects here, which will only increase if the LNP wins the Queensland election, which is highly likely in a few months' time. So an advantaged location in terms of market, also advantaged in terms of this is an area where oil and gas has been present for 100 years. The communities understand it. That is vital. When you go to new places, people don't like new things and they tend to oppose them. That's not an issue here. So Daydream 2, our recent appraisal well, has made very significant breakthroughs on a number of technical fronts. The Taroom Trough hosts, and we think we've proved it, a basin-centered gas play. That's an unconventional play that does not need conventional structures, can accordingly be pervasive and host an enormous amount of extractable gas. So a number of the fronts under which we've made breakthroughs are on validating a mechanical earth model. This is the same thing that Tina was alluding to earlier. That was a cornerstone of us achieving the R&D tax credit that I mentioned, whereby the federal government is generously paying for about half the cost of our well. We took cuttings from coals at 3,700 meters and deeper. That's never been done before. We proved that the gas content in those coals was vastly higher than we or anybody else had thought, which goes to the gas in place. And in our tenement alone, there's probably 30 TCF gas in place. You apply a small recovery factor to that, and it's a big number. We encountered a free-flowing reservoir that flowed without stimulation, again, never achieved before in the Taroom Trough, and that was at 4,200 meters in depth, which normally your overburden pressure would prevent free flow at those sorts of depths. But there are some analogues here with the conventional traps in the Perth Basin in terms of the factors that have retained porosity and permeability at those depths. We've applied new stimulation techniques, again, a cornerstone of our R&D program. And I think it's critical to recognize that in the 10 or 12 years since British Gas invested in this region, the amount of advances in America on productivity improvements in getting tight gas out and unconventional plays of various types has been enormous. And if I can just render that into some numbers, America currently produces 125 BCF a day. They've got less than 100 gas rigs doing that. The productivity per rig is just off the charts. I mean, 10 years ago, there had been 400 or 500 gas rigs in operation producing 60 or 70 BCF a day. We stimulated the deep coal zone. We flowed gas from a coal zone at 3,700 meters in depth. That's certainly the deepest in Australia. We haven't found any evidence that anybody else in the world has done that, although Sinopec might have. We confirmed that CO2 is pipeline spec, 1 or 2%. That's important. CO2 comes with a cost in terms of the mechanics of stripping it out from a gas stream, also potential carbon tax imposts, and also big companies don't want to go into high CO2 plays. So we're pretty close to declaring commerciality. Given the gas prices that I've mentioned, a relatively low flow rate in historical terms from a tight gas play, which will have a particular type curve, that is the shape of its production. We see a break-even flow rate of 2.5 million a day at a wellhead price of $10. There are some liquids here, basically LPGs, which are pipeline spec, which is good. Some condensate, which obviously helps economics, but I think condensate's probably correlated with depth. Shell, who are drilling up dip from us, seem to have got more condensate than we have, although, of course, they don't tell us or the world what they're doing. So a large unconventional play like this requires a code to be cracked. And the evidence in the US unconventional plays is that trial and error and expertise and multiple operator activity are the key elements to cracking the relevant codes in each particular location. And the work that we and our neighbors are doing is undertaking that code cracking here. We see this as a stack play. There are multiple reservoirs, coals and sandstones that can be accessed through horizontal wells, potentially through deviated wells, which we are contemplating, and vertical wells, which our appraisal well has been. The permeable sand which we encountered, the Laurel sandstone, we don't know how pervasive that is. We expect the decades of work to come here will really refine how to identify that. That adds to economics on multiple fronts. There's currently 3 operators drilling. Santos are due to drill again next year, and the multiple parties doing multiple things is a great assistance to cracking the code. But on that code cracking front, I've taken the liberty of quoting Churchill after the Battle of El Alamein, when he noted that this is in effect just the start of the process, very far from the end of it. So the multiple operator activity can be illustrated on this map here. We're in the middle in green. We've added acreage through a gazettal round, a single license and 3 separate geographical parcels, some of which are in the Taroom Trough, one part in the southwest which isn't. We in effect bid a shallow well in that southwest part to access the Taroom contingent resources, and in effect have acquired, at this stage 150 BCF for a cost which is either minimal or zero if we farm that out. The Fin Review recently reported that Shell had made certainly a flare from its second well in this region. Our rough estimate is Shell's probably spending a couple of $100 million here. They operate, as most of you know, one of the liquefaction plants in Gladstone. Santos has been effusive about this, but they're due to drill a well next year, but clearly they're capital constrained. We have a neighbour to the southwest, Omega Oil and Gas. It is listed on the ASX, but it has 2 very substantial shareholders, one of whom, TriStar, who is probably the primary US instigator of the coal seam gas revolution in Queensland and makes a lot of money from that to this day. So this is an area that's attractive to large sources of capital. Our job as a junior is to go in early, explore, appraise, and then find people who can take that to development and production, not to blow our brains out in trying to do that ourselves. And this area is attractive in that, firstly, it's brownfields. Majors are already in Queensland. CO2 is low, and that's critical. It's large. If we add up our booked contingent resources with our neighbours, there's 5 to 10 TCF there already. Sovereign risk is low. Queensland, along with WA and SA, remain very welcome states for resource investors. And investment here can be dialed up and down. It's an onshore play that doesn't require a single massive FID, which again gives a lot of option value. So the resource base, we've grown it over the few years we've been here. We've got contingent resources, 1.5 TCF. We've got prospective resources in the coal of 3.6. Given the flows we've obtained from the coals, we'll start to convert that. If we drill deeper, we should add to the contingent resources. We can add lateral wells and add more contingent resources in the southern part, which is less explored. I won't go over this in the interest of time. It basically illustrates how we got in here and we acted quickly. We have progressively de-risked the asset, and I suppose an advantage that we have compared to Shell is that we can do things quickly, although our budget is somewhat more constrained. What they take 5 years to plan, we can plan in 5 months. Many of you know that I've spoken here before about our Mongolian coal bed methane business, which was backdoor listed into the company nearly 6 years ago. Again, we were a pioneer there. We made the first gas discovery in the country. Others have followed us. We're in a stage now of de-risking through a long-term pilot production project, which we illustrate on the next slide. And we anticipate that we'll have desorbed gas breakthrough by around the end of the year, and that's our primary goal for just now. Okay, so multiple short-term work streams giving rise to news flow and activity in our grandest project in Queensland, and within the next month we will clean up our well and test all zones contemporaneously, and with a view to declaring commerciality on the threshold I mentioned earlier. We are considering production testing involving tubing and such like in various configurations. Our planning for Daydream 3 is underway. Contingent resource upgrades are underway, and discussions with potential partners of scale, which we've been maturing for a while, we hope to bring to some form of conclusion post that production test. Our southwestern block we call Diona. We've matured various shallow conventional prospects there, and we're in discussions with various parties about farming in. And in Mongolia, we're moving our pilot towards that key gas breakthrough. So in summary, the world needs more gas for a lot longer. Government policy is now explicitly recognising that, and we expect that government support to increase. If they face a political crisis of cold showers and power cuts, the amount of support that they give will almost be unlimited. East Coast has got very strong pricing. It's moved from historically a low gas price market to an LNG import parity market. And the LNG plants that exist have growing ullage, which is just a brownfields advantage to encourage exploitation of gas resources. Taroom Trough, fabulously located on many fronts. And that's being reflected by multiple operator activity. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent. We're starting to unlock this key play, and we have an imminent testing program which will catalyse the next activity stages, as will the activities of our neighbours. Thank you very much.